Hello, my name is Kenneth Rogers, and I am here to talk about sex addiction. The term sex addiction is used to describe the behavior of a person who has an unusually intense sex drive or obsession with sex. Sex and the thought of sex tend to dominate the sex addict's thinking, making it difficult to work or engage in healthy personal relationships. Sex addicts engage in distorted thinking, often rationalizing and justifying their behavior and blaming others for problems. They generally deny that they have a problem and make excuses for their actions. Sex addiction is also associated with risk taking. A person with a sex addiction engages in various forms of sexual activity, despite the potential for negative and or dangerous consequences. In addition to damaging the addict's relationships and interfering with his or her work and social life, a sexual addiction also puts the person at risk for emotional and physical injury. For some people, the sex addiction progresses to involve illegal activities, such as exhibitionism, which is exposing yourself in public, making obscene phone calls, or molestation. And it should be added that sex addicts do not necessarily become sex offenders. Some typical behaviors associated with sex addiction include compulsive masturbation or self stimulation, uh, multiple affairs, extramarital affairs, multiple or anonymous sexual partners and or one-night stands, consistent use of pornography, unsafe sex, phone or computer sex, prostitution or use of prostitutes, exhibitionism, excessive dating through personal ads, voyeurism, which is like watching others and stalking, sexual harassment, and rape and molestation. Generally, a person with sex addiction gains little satisfaction from the sexual activity and forms of emotional bond with their sexual partners. In addition, the problem of sex addiction often leads to feeling guilt and a lot of shame. And the sex addict also feels a lack of control over their behavior, despite the negative consequences, which can be financial, health, social, and emotional. Uh, you may ask about treatment for this disease. Most sex addicts live in denial of their addiction, and treating their addiction is dependent on the person accepting and admitting that they have a problem, which is like everything else. In many cases, it's a significant event, such as the loss of a job, marriage, arrest, or health crisis, to force them to admit their problems. Treatment of sex addiction focuses on controlling the addictive behavior and helping the person develop a healthy sexuality. Treatment includes education about healthy sex, individual counseling, marital family therapy, support groups, and 12-step recovery programs for people with sex addictions, like Sex Addicts Anonymous, are also available. In some cases, medications also used to treat OCD um, may be used to curb the compulsive nature of sex addiction. These are medications like Prozac and Anafranil. Uh, there's a bunch of medications used to treat this, and there's still studies are out. The juries are out on those to tell if they actually work or not. Uh, there's a lot of related diseases, as we already stated, and there's an index that describes them, but it's difficult to diagnose someone with this disease. Um, the American Psychiatric Association publishes the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is a book of acknowledged disorders and the criteria that allows it to be defined as a disorder in the first place. And the most recent version of that manual was published in 2000, and it does not recognize sex addiction as a diagnosis. Although some authors have expressed that excluding sex addiction from the DSM represents a problem, the proposed diagnosis was rejected for consideration. Daryl Rieger, who's the vice chair, said that although hypersexuality is proposed a new addition, the phenomenon was not at the point where we were ready to call it an addiction. This is 10 years ago now, and it still hasn't been updated. Um, they The book does include a miscellaneous diagnosis called sexual disorders not otherwise specified. And one of the examples of it is distress about a pattern of repeated sexual relationships involving a succession of lovers who are experienced by the individual only as things to be used. Other examples include compulsive fixation on an unattainable partner, compulsive masturbation, love relationships, and compulsive sexuality in a relationship. And these are all classified under it, but the actual term sex addiction is not an actually medically recognized term by this standard. The World Health Organization produces the International Classification of Diseases, and excessive sex drive is listed in there also. Um, there are two philosophers and doctors that have noted, the Irons and Schneider, that addictive sexual disorders that do not fit into these categories can be diagnosed using an adaptation of the book criteria for substance dependence. Um, Patrick Carnes, a proponent of the idea of sexual addiction, proposed using these following methods, and he was one of the first people to even bring it up. Recurrent failure to resist impulses and engage in extreme acts of sex, frequently engaging those behaviors to a greater extent over a long period of time, persistent desire or unsuccessful efforts to stop or reduce those behaviors. And these are some ways that he's defined them. He has about 20 of them, if interested. And then I guess the biggest topic, now that we have the information, is sex addiction real? It's a lot of high-profile celebrities have sought treatment for addiction, to elicit eye rolling and sarcastic reactions. They want. You see a lot of celebrities entering like sex rehab and stuff because they cheat on someone, and that messes up the problem for people who really do have an issue with their sex addiction, because society tends to write it off as something not valid. You know, many experts aren't convinced in it either. Sex addiction is not formally recognized, and it's just a problem. While sex may indeed be taken akin to drugs and its ability to bring on serious relationship wrecking and life altering behavior, it is not supported by the evidence that approves it. The chair of the American Psychiatric Association said drugs activate an addict's brain or reward system directly, like getting food or water. It could be that there are some similarities in those people called sex addicts, but it hasn't been studied or demonstrated. So, addiction is a really serious issue for a lot of people. It starts even with teens, but society tends to write it off as just a natural progression of things, and it's ruining lives and helping people. There are methods that can be taken to improve that and to help people get through whatever they need to get through. And if you have any more questions, there's a lot of good websites and research online. Thank you for your time.